We are starting chapter 12, we're going to call it. It's actually not out of the book. It's a completely worksheet-based chapter. So the reason we're jumping to this chapter is because we have the MCAs, or the 11th graders have the MCAs coming up in a month, which is the math test this year. 10th graders take reading, 9th graders take writing. So we're going to be really focusing on this right before the test because there's a lot of these problems on the test. So we're going to start with basic statistics, mean, median, mode, those kind of things. So it's review, but probably not something that's on like the edge of your brain, so we can refresh all of those things. So first I want you to write down these 11 numbers and making sure you don't miss any of them because we're going to use them to answer some questions. So we're going to go through and get these four things. So when you see the word mean, what's another word that comes to mind other than not nice? Yes, the average. So typically, once kids understand or remember what each of these math terms mean, they easily remember how to find the answer. So how do you find the average of numbers? Yes. So we're going to take the sum over the number of numbers. Okay, so I know there's 11 numbers. What is the sum of those numbers? All of you having calculators out will speed these along a lot so that we can check and double check everyone's work. Because once we get 3 people to confirm the same number, we'll call it good. $58. Anyone else? Okay. So let's round to the nearest tenth. What's the answer? Okay, so that's how you find the mean. What's another way to think of the median? Middle, the middle number. Okay, what do we have to do in order to find the middle number? Yes, smallest to largest. So we've got 2, 3, 3, 4, 5, 5, 6, 6, 7, 7, 10. Okay, so the middle number, we have an odd number of numbers, so it's actually one of the numbers in the list. That would be your median. Now, if you have an even number of numbers, how do you find the median? If you have 2 numbers that are in the middle, you don't divide the 2. Halfway between those 2 numbers. So really you're finding the what of the 2 numbers? The average of the 2 numbers. You add them up and divide by 2. So it cuts it right in half. So if you have an even number of numbers, keep that in mind, which you will have on the homework and probably on the test. Mode, what's the word you should think of? Most common. Mode and most kind of sound the same. Now in this case, we actually have 4 modes because there's 4 numbers that show up twice. If you have a list of numbers that don't have any repeats, you don't have a mode at all. So we have 3, 5, 6, and 7 as the mode. Range, what are we doing? Max minus min. So for this range of numbers, we get 8. That tells you how far your numbers are spread out. Another review, box and whisker plot. I'll review how to make these. Does anyone know what information we're using when we're making a box and whisker? What values are we utilizing? We're using the median, and we're using a couple more things. So we're going to need the median first. Then we're going to need what's called the 2 quartiles, quartile 1 and quartile 3. And then we're also going to need the max and the min. Those are the two whiskers right here. So I'll show you what I mean by that. We need to look at the median, so we're going to use the list that's up at the top of the screen there. The median is one of our values, which is 5. Q1 and Q3. Q1 and Q3, the two quartiles, are found by finding the median of the left and the median of the right. So in this case, we used a number in our list, so we're not going to use that when we're finding the median of the left-hand side. If you had a list of numbers, and the two middle numbers were 8 and 10, so your median is really 9. Then you're going to use 8 and 10 when you're calculating what the two quartiles are. Do you see the difference? So if the median is in your list of numbers, don't use it when you're finding Q1 and Q3. But if your median is in between two numbers, then you do use those lists when you're calculating the median. So looking at this left-hand side, there's Q1, and here's Q3. You just find the median of whatever is left over of your two sides, the left and the right. The max and the min are also used on this graph. So, box and whisker. We want to first draw the number line. And our numbers range from 2 to 10, so I'm going to start at 0, go up to 10, and then put all my dashes. Get 5 in the middle. Try to space them out as evenly as possible. Do your best. Number line first is very important so that everything is spaced evenly. Otherwise, your box and whisker plot means nothing if you're not basing it off of a good number line. So we need to plot everything. This creates the box, these three numbers right here. So 1, 2, 3. Here's the beginning of the box. Here is the middle of the box. Here's the end of the box. So you draw the 3 vertical lines and then you create a rectangle, which is the middle 50% of your data. Like the middle half falls inside of that box, and then your whiskers extend out to the minimum and the maximum. So the minimum is at 2, maximum is at 10. So just to reiterate, you need to have those 5 numbers on your picture. That's what we're looking at. It shows the spread of the data. It's just a visual image of what your numbers look like instead of just a list of numbers. Questions on box and whisker? I'm looking for the shape and making sure that all of these line up at the right spot. You don't need these labels up here, but in your notes it's nice to have just so you can remember what are the 5 things I need to put on here. Anyone still need this? Okay, moving on to stem and leaf plot. So I'm going to say these numbers so that you don't have to keep looking up here. So if you want to get ready, I'm just going to list all of them for you. So here we go. 23, 34, 23, 27, 39, 48, 47, 41, 20, 33, 30, 35, 35, 50. So what we're going to do is create a stem and leaf plot, which is another visual image, which displays something completely different. So what you're going to do is start with a vertical line. The stem is the first digit in all of your numbers, and typically stem and leaf plots are with 2-digit numbers. That's what we're going to be looking at anyway this year. So the stem is the first digit in all of these. So our smallest number is in the 20s, correct? And then we have a couple numbers in the 30s, in the 40s, and it looks like we even have some in the 50s, but nothing more than that. Now, after each of these, you list the second number, but they're in increasing order. So the smallest number is 20, correct? Right here. So 0 means that's the second number, so 20. The next biggest number is what? Okay, there's 23, 23. Now, some books have commas in between the numbers. We're not going to because most don't. So we have 20, 23, 23. What's the next biggest? 27. Any others? Okay, what about 30s? We've got 30, 33, 34, and 39. Now, one thing that when you're making these, that's a good rule of thumb, is to line them up vertically. Notice that my 7 is right above the 5. The reason for that, I'll explain in a moment. So what is 4s? 1. And then 50s? 0. Now, if you would take this stem and leaf plot and turn it on its side so that the line was horizontal at the bottom, what you've created is a bar graph that shows you which numbers are happening the most often. Looks like we have most of our numbers in the 30s. So if you would turn this and picture them as a bar graph, it tells you where most of your numbers are. So that's the reason you want to line them up vertically so that they're the same height in reference to each other. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's a stem and leaf plot. Questions on that? Okay, next I'm going to give you an actual MCA question that I want you to write down because I promise you, you will see it. And it's probably on the ACT as well, which most of you will end up taking. So I'm going to give you some time to write this down. And at first glance, it may seem difficult, but I'll show you that it's really not.
What would you do for digit numbers on a stem and leaf plot?
I'll show you later. As you're finishing up writing this down, how do teachers come up with a grade at the end? What operation are they doing? They're finding the mean, right? So we need to figure out the mean of these. How many tests is she taking? 5 tests. So I know at the end I'm going to have to divide by 5. What am I going to be adding together? 5 test scores. What are the test scores? Why isn't it 87? 87 is her grade. Okay, so that has to go there. So this now becomes a very simple algebra problem. We just had to know how to set it up. So this is the mean, which we just reviewed, adding up all of your numbers and dividing by how many there are. And in the end, we actually get the answer in this word problem. So we just have to solve for x. What would be a good thing to do first? What are these 4 numbers added together? We'll do that in this step as well. How much?
346.
And what's this over here? Okay, so now you just have one last step. Figure out what she got on that 5th test. So she got a B+ on that last test in order to give her that final grade of 87. Questions on that? So whenever you're getting word problems, which most of the test is, whether you're taking it this year or next year or the year after, write down what you do know and start putting it down. Write the problem down, write your numbers down, figure out, should I add, subtract, multiply, divide? What should I do? Just start the problem and it typically falls into place. Okay, let's move on. Looking at standard deviation. These you for sure need to write down. So I will wait till you get them all written down. The headings right there are what you're finding. In parentheses, I'm telling you how to find those things. And after you're done writing down the steps, I'll tell you what standard deviation is and why we're finding it. And lots of you having your calculators ready will help this go much, much faster. So anytime you're reading an article or anything that has to do with research, they're 95% of the time probably going to give you the standard deviation. And you may look at that number and say, whoop-de-doo, big deal. Okay, the reason they're telling you that number is it tells us some very important information. Anytime you're doing a survey or collecting data, you're getting a whole bunch of numbers. So if you get a small standard deviation, that means that your numbers are really close together. So all of your data is coming in very similarly. If you get a big standard deviation, that means your numbers are really spread out. So, and depending on what you're trying to research, you may want a big standard deviation to prove something, and some other times you may want a small deviation, standard deviation to show that your numbers are really close together. So what standard deviation is the average distance from the mean. So it tells you the average units away from the mean your numbers are. So if your numbers are really close together, they're probably going to be really close to the mean and have a number that's like 1 or 2 away from that number. Whatever we get for our answer is how the average distance from whatever our mean ends up being. So typically, when you're doing surveys, you're going to collect thousands and thousands of numbers. We're just going to try this with 8 numbers. Okay, so these are the 8 numbers, and I've already put them in increasing order for you. Not that that's hugely important, but at least it gives us that step. So 42, 44, 47, 48, 50, 53, 55, 58. So we're going to do these things. So if somebody could start calculating the mean, that would be awesome. And just round to the nearest tenth. How much? 49.6. All right, so our goal in the end is to find out what is the average distance away from 49.6 that our numbers are. This process tells us that. So we're going to find the deviation, which up here says how each number differs from the mean. So what we're going to take is each of these orange numbers and subtract the mean. So we're going to get some positive and some negative. So 42 minus 49.6. 44 minus 49.6. $47 minus 49.6. 48 minus 49.6. 50 minus 49.6. Next one. Is it 3.4? And then 5.4? And 8.4? Okay, so we found the difference. Okay, that's how far away each of those numbers is from the mean. The variance up here says we need to square each of these deviations and then find a new mean of those numbers. So I need all of your help in squaring these numbers. Now, if you square a negative, what happens? Turns positive. So let's ignore the negatives for now and just square each of these numbers because they're all going to end up being positive. And give me the whole number. One more time.
57.76.
Okay, we need to find the new mean. So I'm going to need at least 3 of you to check and double check. We need the new mean of those numbers. Some of you are really good at texting and you can do this without looking. That's amazing. Somebody else? Give me more numbers than that. Okay, how do you find the standard deviation? Square root that number. What do we get? No, square root, not square. 5 point what? 1? Okay, so we'll go 5.1. 5.1 is the average distance that all of these numbers are away from 49.6. That is what we just found. This process, slightly painful, correct? Okay. I'm going to show you how to do it on your calculator if you have the TI-30s. If you have a graphing calculator, I can show you as well. If you have something else, you might be out of luck. I'll try. But if you have the normal, the TI-30 where you can see what you're typing in above it and then the answer comes below it, this is how you do it. So I want you to write this down if you have this calculator. If you don't, you either have to do it by hand or borrow the calculator from somebody on the test day so that you can do this. So these are the steps. These are the buttons you're going to push. And this is step 5. So write them down first. Make them in caps because that's how it is on your calculator. Get used to seeing it that way. You're going to hit stat. You're going to hit one variable. Then hit data so we can enter the numbers. And then stat var is where you're going to get your answers. And I'm not sure how to do it on the iPad calculators, so might be out of luck on that one as well. I'll show you how to do it on that one. It's not this way. So if you're planning on borrowing a calculator to make your life a lot easier, I would write these down as well, if you don't have one of these calculators. So write it down first, and then I'll have us go through it and make sure we can all get the same answer. Ready? Okay, so here's our numbers. We want to put them in, but first we have to turn our stat mode on. So if you look at your calculator, above data is typically where it is. It says stat. Everyone see that? I don't know if your calculator has it. I'll look later. Okay, so everyone to second data, so your stat turns on, you'll see an option of one variable or two variables. Two variables would be a case where you're comparing two things like shoe size and height, two lists of numbers. We don't have that, we just have one list of numbers. So we're doing one variable, so hit enter. Now at the bottom of your screen or at the top, it's different for some calculators, you'll see the word stat. That tells you that your stat is on. It's right next to degrees or radians or whatever you have selected. So you should see stat. Now that stat is on, we can enter our data. So hit the data button and you should see x1 equals. This is where you're going to enter your numbers. So 42 is our first number. Hit 42 and then hit the down arrow and it should say frequency 1. Now you would only change this if you had multiple 42s. We don't have any duplicate numbers, so all of our frequencies are going to be 1 because it only happens once. That way you don't have to, if you have like 6 50s, you don't have to type 50 in 6 times. That's why it's there. So just scroll down again to x2 and enter all of your numbers. So frequency is 1 on all of them. Okay, so once you get those 8 numbers entered, you're going to hit stat var. So stat var is right next to data. You hit stat var, and you're going to get a bunch of symbols at the top and then an 8. You get that? Now here's what each of those mean. The n is the number of terms. Do we have 8 terms? 8 numbers. Okay, that tells you that. Scroll over to x bar. X bar is your average. So it'll calculate your average for you, which is what we had, correct? 49.6. Scroll over. We're not going to deal with SX. That's a little bit different and not something we're going to look at in this class. Scroll over to the last one, which is your standard deviation. That symbol is a Greek letter. That's what statisticians use for standard deviation. So that calculated your standard deviation for you just by entering your numbers, 5.1. So when you're taking the test, I'm really seeing, do you know how to use the tool in front of you, which is your calculator? So you're going to have to know how to do this. You're not going to get a cheat sheet. You're going to have to know how to put this in. Now, hugely important, you have to exit stat when you're done, which is above stat var. Okay? Otherwise, it's going to keep your numbers in there, and next time you go to put something in, it's going to still have those numbers in there. This will clear your numbers so that your next problem isn't messed up. So exit stat. It'll make sure that you want to, yes or no. You hit enter, and you're done. Questions?
What's that symbol called?
Sigma. Other questions?